return to Meet the Author with Ken Huck.
Welcome back. Here in the second half hour, Claudia McAdam is back with us today. And the reason I wanted to have her on this time of year, it's hard to believe, but Christmas is just, it seems like, I think it's like 5-6 weeks away at this point. People are out there starting to think about gifts. And I think it's important to encourage young readers. And Claudia has 2 new children's books out. And the one is titled Kristoff and the First Christmas Tree, and the other one is The Mermaid's Gift. And like I said, before going into the break, Claudia has written one of my favorite novels for young people, and that was Awakening, and that came out a few years ago. And I still continue to tell people about it. I was talking to people about it at confirmation class just the other night. But anyway, Claudia she says that story has the power to draw in readers and to take them to a completely new place. And it was an experience she has treasured and craved since she was a child. And since the age of 10, she knew she wanted to be a writer, and she's been able to fulfill that because she's written 16 books, I believe, at this point. Claudia lives in my favorite state, the state of Colorado, and she lives in Denver, and it's my very great privilege to welcome Claudia McAdam back to Radio Maria.
Hi, Ken. Good afternoon, and hello to your listeners.
Well, thanks for coming back. It's been way, way too long. I'm glad we have this chance to kind of catch up again. And it's just in time for Christmas. These are the books we're going to be talking about. Would make great Christmas gifts to give to kids. And one of them is titled Kristoff and the First Christmas Tree, which sounds really appropriate for this time of year. Tell us a little bit about this book.
I'd be delighted to do that. Have you ever wondered where we get the tradition of bringing evergreen trees into the home at Christmas time? Have you ever asked yourself, why do we do that? And there's a lot of legends about how that tradition got started, but there's only one legend that we can trace back to a real person, and that is St. Boniface, who lived in the early to mid-8th century. And my book is a fictionalized version of the legend of how his actions brought about that tradition of bringing evergreen trees into the home at Christmas.
Well, where did you come up with the idea for writing this story?
I actually came across the legend of St. Boniface several years ago when I was writing a different book, another Christmas book, and I was so enthralled with his story, which is based mostly on fact, but a little bit on fable or legend that we're not sure about the factual background of the Christmas tree part of his story, that I thought this would be a really fun story for kids to read or to have read to them, to learn about what living a virtuous life can do and what it can accomplish. And so I did a lot of research into St. Boniface and pulled together his true story and the legend of how his actions brought about the tradition of bringing Christmas trees into the home, and just set about writing that book.
What age range do you think is this particular book appropriate for? What did you have in mind when you were writing it?
It's a read-aloud picture story book, so it can be read to any age group. So I would say, preschoolers on up, it's appropriate for. Early elementary school students are able to read it themselves, but the younger kids enjoy having it read to them as well. And as a matter of fact, I make presentations not only in schools, but to adult groups. And believe it or not, adults like to be read to, too. So I think I call it a family book.
Okay, so it's a kind of book that a parent or a grandparent or someone could sit and actually read with the child, and then and I know there's specific messages that you want to get across. And one of the things I like about it, and one of the things I think it makes it very relevant to younger kids, is there is a youngster in the story, right?
Exactly right. The story is set on Christmas Eve in the year 722, and the young boy in the story, his name is Kristoff. He's an orphan boy, and he's accompanying the missionary priest Boniface through the German countryside on their way to what will be this boy's first Christmas spent outside the orphanage. When they happen upon a group of men worshiping a sacred oak tree and preparing to sacrifice the son of the village chieftain, the little boy, Kristoff, his nickname is Kit, is fearful, but Boniface instills in him faith and bravery and what Boniface does is encounters this group of pagans, converts them by his actions. They are worshiping a sacred oak tree. He says that oak has no power, only the one true God does. The pagans challenge him to prove it, and with one stroke of an axe, he fells this mighty tree, and in the stump of that oak tree is this beautiful fir tree that becomes the first Christmas tree, as legend would have it.
Well, one of the nice things I know, I don't know if you do this with all your books. I want to say you did it with Awakening, and I know you've done it with the two books we're talking about today, is you create a discussion and activity guide that goes along with the books. Where do people get this? And tell us a little bit about what's in those. I mean, they're several pages long. They're very colorful in terms of the artwork. You sent me copies of them, but talk a little bit about those activity and discussion books that go along with both of the books we're talking about today.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to do that. The discussion and activities guides that I have available can be requested through my website, ClaudiaMcAdam.com, and they're free. I'm happy to send them out to whomever would like to use them, whether parents and grandparents want to use it in the home or teachers and librarians want to use them in the school setting. And I put in there discussion questions, writing prompts, some fun things to do like a craft or a maze or a word search. And my goal is to get the kids to think more deeply about the story. In both of the books that we're talking about today, my two new picture story books, Kristoff and the First Christmas Tree and The Mermaid's Gift, the characters in those stories exemplify living virtuous lives. So while young kids may not be able to name the cardinal virtues of prudence and justice and temperance and fortitude, they know it when they see it. So I love to ask kids, what makes a hero, or who are your heroes? And frequently, it's sports figures or reality TV stars or music icons. But I challenge the readers to look deeply into what makes a truly heroic person and how that person gives of themselves and does something courageous for someone else. And that is living a virtuous life. So there's different questions that prompt the kids to identify those traits in the characters in my books.
Well, again, for our listeners who may have joined us late, I know people, if you're listening in your car and you just got into your car, the books we're talking about were written by my guest here in the second half hour, Claudia McAdam. And the book we've been talking about is Kristoff and the First Christmas Tree. And very shortly, we're going to be talking about her other book, The Mermaid's Gift. One of the other things that you do that's kind of fun, Claudia, is if people go to your website, you have created these 90-second videos for each of the books. Those are good things because you actually show some of the artwork in the book. But talk a little bit about those videos.
It's a great way for people to get a peek inside the story. If you go to the movies and you see the coming attractions, those are movie trailers that they air. These are book trailers. So they're 90-second video presentations of the content of the book. And they were done by my brother, who is an Emmy Award-winning regional Emmy Award winner, and he produces this type of material and did a really lovely job, I think, putting these together to give people a little snippet of the story. And in each case, you get to see the illustrator's beautiful work. Kristoff and the First Christmas Tree was illustrated by a man who lives in Scotland who I've never met. His name is Dave Hill. The Mermaid's Gift was illustrated by a woman who lives in New York City, whose name is Tracy Van Wagener. She and I have never met either. So it's fun to see the pictures that go along with the story that I've created.
Okay, I have to ask. I was going to ask about this how it works when there's an illustrated book like this, how that relationship works between the author and the artist. I've always wondered, do you as the writer write the story, and then does the artist come back and create the artwork around it? Is it a give and take process? And now I'm really curious because in Kristoff and the First Christmas Tree, you said the artist is in Scotland and you've never met him.
That's exactly right. The way that works is that unless you are an author-illustrator, which I am not, I cannot draw a straight line with a ruler, so I'm not going to do any of my own artwork. An author who writes the story sends it to a publisher. If they buy it, then the publisher goes to their stable of illustrators or to illustrators who have sent them samples of their own work looking for books to illustrate, and they put the story together with that artist. Now, they may ask for my input in terms of whose style of art or illustration do you see fitting this book, and I may give them some suggestions of illustrators whose style I think would work with this book, but I don't have any say in who they ultimately hire. Then, once they hire that person, they usually ask the author not to get in contact with the illustrator. They want the illustrator to have free rein over painting the pictures that will go along with the story. They want the illustrator to be able to interpret the story visually the way he or she sees it. So that's really fun to see what they come up with.
Wow, I had no idea. I had absolutely no idea that's the way the process works. That's fascinating. Well, we need to talk about the second book. The second book, which would also make a great gift, it also comes with an activity guide, is The Mermaid's Gift. Tell us a little bit about that story, and it's also based on some fact.
It is. It's another legend that I've adapted and brought to current day. It's actually based on a couple of different stories, and it's part fact and part fable. The fact part is that the tiny island off of Venice that's called Burano is well known for their lace making, and that's a trade that dates back to the 1500s on that island. The fable part is that industry began when a mermaid whipped the sea with her tail and formed lace out of it, a lace then that the women of that island duplicated and sold, and it was famous all over Europe for centuries. So that's the fable. The true story is perhaps these women, mending their husbands' fishing nets, took up lace making as a pastime and began this industry. By the time the 1700s rolled around, lace making had died off and fishing was the main industry. But in the year of 1872, a freak winter cold spell iced in the island, and the fishermen could not go out to fish. So the story has it that someone remembered we used to do this lace making thing, and oh, by the way, there's an older woman on the island who still knows how to do it. Let's revive that industry. So the story has it that the school teacher had the older woman teach the young girls how to make lace, and the lace making industry saved the village because they could now make lace again and feed the people. So that I combined all of that in a short story of about 1,000 words, where all the facts and the fables all come into play in that one story, and it's kind of a back and forth. It's got danger in it because the fisherman goes out to fish when the lagoon finally thaws, doesn't catch anything, nearly drowns when his boat is capsized. The mermaid gives him this gift of lace, and he brings it back to the island where his loyal and prayerful fiancée helps make the lace and feed the entire village.
Well, here's what I learned in reading your book. I was in Venice maybe a little bit more than a year and a half ago, and if you go to Venice, it's just filled with shops, and there's a lot of lace shops, and which, as a guy, I wasn't too interested in lace shops, but my sisters and were there, and we went in, but I didn't know why Venice was famous for this lace. And that's what I learned. One of the things I learned from your book is that is one of the things that they're famous for in that region. But as you point out, later in your book, you talk about this the fact, what the facts are, and you said that not that many people actually do the handmade lace anymore, just because it is so intensive. But they're still famous for it.
They are, and it was. Go ahead.
But they still sell it. I mean, they're still selling lace in Venice, and it's all based on this historical industry that's kind of disappeared to a certain extent. But there's still a lot of lace shops in the city of Venice.
That's right. And on the island of Burano, where my story is set, there is a lace-making museum at the site of what was once the School of Lace Making.
Well, again, what age range would you recommend for this book, The Mermaid's Gift?
I think it's really identical to Kristoff and the First Christmas Tree. It's a book that young elementary school age children can read, but it's a book that younger children enjoy having read to them, and adults enjoy the story as well. So again, I think of picture storybooks as being family books because it's something that all age ranges can enjoy and share together.
And, well, another question that I have about this is purchasing the books. These two books are published by two different publishers. Where is the best place for listeners to find your books and to purchase them?
Any of my books can be purchased through their respective publishers. So Kristoff and the First Christmas Tree is published by Paraclete Press. The Mermaid's Gift is published by Pelican Publishing. A whole bunch of P's in those names. And they can be bought directly through those publishers or online at online bookstores such as Amazon.com or BarnesandNoble.com. Or I find that you can walk into your local bookseller, and if you request a certain book, they'll get it for you. So it's pretty easy to get a book. There's so many online resources, or by just contacting the publisher. And you can always, come to my website, and I can, you'll see where those outlets are, so that you can find out how to purchase a book.
And I should let listeners know that on the Meet the Author Facebook page, I've already put the links to the different publishers, and also you supplied me with their phone numbers. And then when this podcast is put on the radiomaria.us website here in a couple days, that same information will be posted with the podcast. I need to. We're rapidly running out of time here. I did want to ask you: are you still? You mentioned you're doing some presentations to schools. Are you still doing remote presentations over Skype on your various books, or is it pretty much in person these days?
I do in person, and I do Skype visits. So if I live in Colorado, and if you're in Michigan, you can contact me through my website, and we can arrange to do a Skype visit. It's fun to do. It's not without its technical challenges at times, but it's a good way to interact with the classroom far, far away.
Well, in the last 3 or 4 minutes we have here, as I mentioned before going into the break, I am an absolute huge fan of your book, Awakening. It's such a popular book. It's been published, I believe, in a few languages, including German and Polish. When you were on with me a few years ago, I absolutely fell in love with that book. It's written for young adults, but it really captured my imagination because it is such an interesting story. Like I said, you said that a story should draw you in, and that's what that book did for me. And I have to ask you, you and I have emailed back and forth over the years. I know you were interested in writing a sequel to it.